Hi, my name is Jeremy Smith, the Market Manager for Forensic and Clinical Sciences here at Shimadzu Scientific Instruments. Today, I'd like to discuss our analytical solutions that are essential for success in the field of forensic science. Forensic science seeks to draw conclusions for legal matters by using the scientific methods to investigate crimes or evidence. As defined by the Organization of Scientific Area Committees, or OSAC, the forensic sciences are categorized under 5 main disciplines. These disciplines include biology and DNA, chemistry, toxicology and trace evidence, physics or pattern interpretation, medicine, pathology, or even anthropology, and finally, digital or multimedia. These disciplines can actually be broken down further into more detailed subgroups. Here at SSI, we apply our analytical instruments to focus mainly on the chemistry-related discipline of forensic science. These solutions are suitable for the analysis of fire debris, explosives, geological materials, gunshot residue, trace materials, seized drugs, and even toxicology. Analytical instruments are needed to properly identify, confirm, and quantitate analytes in forensic casework. For example, an FTIR is used to identify a suspicious white powder. Further confirmation testing of the substance is conducted by gas chromatography mass spectrometry. Each of these techniques utilize the unique chemical properties of the material to determine its identity. The unknown white powder is then compared to a known standard for confirmation. When analyzing bodily fluids such as blood, urine, or even vitreous humor from a crime scene, more sensitive analytical instrumentation may be needed. Liquid chromatography mass spectrometry is a tool which can analyze drugs or toxins in biological matrices in femtomole ranges. Trace evidence materials such as hairs, fibers, gunshot residue, films, and adhesives can be identified using FTIR as well as other instruments such as EDX. As there are many different disciplines in forensic science, there are many different analytical instruments that can be used to assist in investigating evidence and crime scenes. Shimadzu Scientific Instruments has a large portfolio of analytical instruments to support the market of forensic science. Thank you for listening to this brief introduction to our forensic solutions. If you'd like to learn more, please visit our website at www.investigateyourlab.com.